Hello. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and theories. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most nerve-wracking topics for any Stranger Things fan. Who's actually going to die in Season 5, Volume 2? Now, before we spiral into complete panic, I should mention that Volume 2 hasn't actually been released yet. It drops on December 25th, 2025, which means everything we're going to talk about tonight is pure speculation, based on trailers, interviews, patterns, and probably way too much overthinking on my part. I'll be covering all the death theories I can fit in for tonight, analysing the characters who are most at risk, breaking down the clues from that absolutely terrifying Volume 2 trailer, and looking at what the cast and crew have been saying. We'll talk about the patterns Stranger Things has established over 5 seasons when it comes to killing off beloved characters, examine who's definitely safe, and make some actual predictions about who won't make it out alive. There's plenty to get anxious about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your Eggos, maybe a box of tissues if Garten Matarazzo's warning is anything to go by, get cozy, and let's begin. So here's the thing about Stranger Things, Season 5, Volume 1. It was brilliant, emotional, and absolutely packed with reveals. We got Will's powers awakening, we got the kidnapping of Holly Wheeler and the other kids, we got Vecna's plan starting to unfold. But you know what we didn't get? A single major character death. Not one. And that's honestly pretty unusual for Stranger Things, especially in a final season. The show has built its reputation on gutting us emotionally right when we least expect it, and Volume 1 was surprisingly gentle in that department. Sure, there was danger and tension and plenty of near-death moments, but everyone made it through those first 4 episodes intact, which, when you think about it, is kind of brilliant storytelling, because now we're all absolutely terrified about what's coming in Volume 2. The Duffer Brothers have basically confirmed our worst fears. In interviews, they've said that Volume 2 will feature one of the most violent deaths in the entire series. One of the most violent. Not just sad or shocking, but violent. That's a very specific word choice, and it's been living rent-free in my head since I heard it. But before we all completely spiral, they also said something else that's quite important. Matt Duffer made it clear that Stranger Things is not Game of Thrones. There's no Red Wedding coming. For those who don't know, the Red Wedding was that absolutely brutal episode where Game of Thrones killed off like half the main cast in one go. So the Duffers are saying they won't massacre everyone. We're not losing 5 or 6 beloved characters in one bloodbath. That's comforting, sort of, because not a massacre still means someone's definitely dying. The pattern makes sense if you look at how they have structured the season. Volume 1 was all about Will discovering his powers, setting up the pieces on the chessboard, getting everyone into position for the endgame. Ross Duffer said they knew they wanted to end Volume 1 with Will's power revelation, which meant holding back on the deaths. They needed us to focus on that massive development without the distraction of grieving a major character. Volume 2, though, that's where the real stakes kick in. That's where the chess pieces start getting knocked off the board. If you look at Season 4, the same pattern played out. Volume 1 had danger and close calls, but Eddie Munson's death happened in Volume 2. The Duffers know how to build tension, and they know that making us wait through 4 episodes of near misses only makes the actual death hit harder when it finally comes. And it is coming. Garten Matarazzo, who plays Dustin, basically told us to prepare ourselves. In an interview with E.T., he said fans should get some tissues ready, and that he doesn't really have any words of comfort for us. Which is just lovely, isn't it? Very reassuring. I appreciate the honesty, but also, Gaten, please, we're already anxious enough. The thing is, the emotional stakes have never been higher. This is the end. The actual final end of Stranger Things. After nearly a decade, the Duffers have been building to this since 2016, and they're not going to let everyone waltz into the sunset unscathed. Someone we love is going to die protecting Hawkins, or protecting the kids, or stopping Vecna. That's just how these stories work. But before we start panicking about who's going to die, let's look at the patterns. because Stranger Things has a very specific formula when it comes to character deaths, and understanding that formula might help us predict who's at risk. Since 2016, Stranger Things has killed off quite a few characters. Some deaths were shocking, some were heartbreaking, and some, honestly, we all saw coming from a mile away. But if you look at all of them together, patterns start to emerge. The Duffers aren't just randomly killing people for shock value. There's a method to the madness. Let's start with Season 1 and Barb Holland. Poor Barb. She died in Episode 3, dragged into the Upside Down by a Demogorgon while sitting alone by Steve's pool. Her death launched an entire cultural movement. Justice for Barb became this massive thing, partly because her death felt so unfair, and partly because nobody in the show seemed to care about her as much as they cared about Will. Barb represented the expendable friend, the one who gets forgotten whilst everyone focuses on the main character. Her death established that Stranger Things was willing to kill likeable characters, but it also established something else. The main kids were safe. Will was in danger the whole season, but he survived. The core group had plot armor. Season 2 gave us Bob Newby, superhero, and God, Bob's death still hurts. He was Joyce's boyfriend, this sweet, nerdy guy who loved her kids and just wanted to help. He was kind and brave and genuinely lovely, and the Duffers killed him in the Season 2 finale, torn apart by demodogs whilst helping everyone escape Hawkins' lab. Bob's death established a new pattern that would repeat: the beloved newcomer who gets introduced, who we grow to love, who becomes part of the found family, and who then dies saving everyone else. Bob was played by Sean Astin, a recognisable face which made his death feel even more significant. We thought his fame would protect him. It didn't. Moving on to Season 3, we got Billy Hargrove's death. Billy was complicated. He was an abuser, a racist, and a bully for most of his time on the show. But Season 3 gave him this redemption arc, showing us glimpses of the trauma that made him that way. And then in the Season 3 finale at Starcourt Mall, he sacrificed himself to save Eleven and the others from the Mind Flayer. He died protecting the kids he'd tormented. Billy's death established yet another pattern: the redemption equals death trope. If a character who's done terrible things starts showing signs of change, starts protecting instead of hurting, they're probably not making it out alive. We also lost Alexei in Season 3, the Russian scientist who'd become this endearing character despite the language barrier. He was shot by a Russian agent at the fun fair, and it was sudden and cruel, and really quite upsetting. Alexei represented another type of death, the character who finally finds happiness right before being killed. He'd just experienced his first American 4th of July celebration, was finally smiling and enjoying himself, and then boom, dead. The Duffers love that particular flavour of tragedy. Season 4 brought us Eddie Munson, and this one properly wrecked people. Eddie was the metalhead dungeon master who got accused of murders he didn't commit, who went on the run, who became part of the group's plan to stop Vecna. He was funny and loyal and brave, and he died in the Upside Down fighting Demobats to buy everyone else time. Eddie's death reinforced the Bob pattern. New character, quickly beloved, dies heroically, saving the main cast. It's basically a guaranteed death sentence if you're a charismatic newcomer who isn't part of the original ensemble. And then there's Max, who technically died. Her heart stopped. She was clinically dead for over a minute after Vecna broke her limbs and blinded her. But Eleven brought her back, and now Max is in a coma, her consciousness trapped somewhere in Vecna's mind. Max's situation is this weird liminal space between dead and alive, and honestly, we still don't know if she's going to properly wake up or not. Looking at all of these together, the patterns are pretty clear. Pattern 1, the main kids from Season 1, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will, have never died. They've been in danger constantly, but they've all survived. Pattern 2, new characters who become beloved, especially if they're played by recognisable actors, are in serious danger. Bob and Eddie both fit this category perfectly. Pattern 3, redemption arcs often end in sacrificial death. Billy proved that one. Pattern 4. Characters who aren't part of the original core cast are expendable, no matter how much we love them. And pattern 5. The show loves to give characters a moment of happiness or peace right before killing them, maximizing the emotional devastation. There's also the fake-out death pattern. Hopper died at the end of season 3, but he was actually alive in a Russian prison. 11 has had multiple near-death moments, but always survives. The show will make us think someone's dead to twist the knife, but then bring them back if they're important enough to the overall story. So what does all this tell us about Volume 2? Well, if the patterns hold, we're probably losing someone newer to the group. Someone beloved, but not part of the original main cast. We might lose someone who's found peace or happiness recently, and we might lose someone who's trying to redeem themselves or prove their worth. The main kids are probably still safe, but everyone else should be properly worried. If I had to bet actual money on who's dying in Volume 2, I'm putting it all on Murray Bauman, and I really hate saying that, because I genuinely love the guy. Murray was introduced way back in Season 2 as this paranoid conspiracy theorist journalist living alone in Illinois, surrounded by maps and theories about secret Russian operations. He was weird and abrasive and absolutely right about everything, which made him brilliant. Over the seasons, he's evolved from this outsider character into someone integral to the adult crew. He became the translator for Alexei, the Russian scientist. He's been Joyce and Hopper's ally in their most dangerous missions. He's cracked codes, infiltrated Russian bases, and generally been the guy who figures things out when everyone else is floundering. But here's the problem. Murray has basically completed his character arc. He went from isolated conspiracy theorist to trusted member of the found family. He's learned to connect with people, to trust others, to be part of something bigger than his paranoid investigations. There's nowhere else for his character to go that would feel like natural growth. And in television writing, when a character's arc feels complete, that character becomes expendable. Murray fits the Bob Newby pattern almost perfectly. He's beloved by the audience, but he's not part of the original main cast. He's played by Brett Gelman, a recognizable comedic actor, which gives his character weight but doesn't protect him. He's someone whose death would hurt the audience and devastate Joyce and Hopper, but wouldn't completely shatter the emotional core of the show the way losing one of the kids would. He's the perfect sacrifice, narratively speaking. Important enough that his death matters, but not so central that the show can't function without him. There's this calculation that happens in TV writing, and it's kind of sad to talk about, but it's real. Writers have to balance impact against devastation. Murray's death would have significant impact. Joyce and Hopper would be absolutely gutted. The audience would be genuinely upset. But would it devastate us the way losing Dustin or Steve would? Probably not. And that's exactly why Murray is in so much danger. He exists in that sweet spot of beloved enough to hurt, expendable enough to kill. Looking at his role in Volume 1, Murray was right there, in the thick of things, helping with plans, providing crucial information, being his usual paranoid but brilliant self. He's positioned as someone who'll be in the final battle, someone who'll be there when things go wrong. And the Duffers have taught us that the characters who are there when things go wrong, who aren't protected by protagonist armor, tend to die heroically. I keep thinking about Bob in that Season 2 finale. He just helped everyone, had just figured out how to open the doors and let them escape, and then he got caught. The Demodogs tore him apart whilst Joyce watched through a window, helpless. It was brutal and sad and served the story by raising the stakes and showing that even good, kind, helpful people don't make it out of these situations alive. Murray could very easily have that same moment, helping everyone escape, staying behind to buy them time, making the sacrifice play because that's what heroes do. What makes me even more nervous is that Murray doesn't have a romantic storyline or a family connection that would traditionally protect a character. Joyce has Hopper and her kids. Hopper has Joyce and 11. Steve has his found family with the kids. Murray has friends and allies, but he's still fundamentally alone in a way that makes him vulnerable. the show could kill him without disrupting a major romantic arc or destroying a family unit. He's self-contained, which, in narrative terms, is basically a target on his back. To be honest, I've been trying to convince myself I'm wrong about this. I've been looking for evidence that Murray will survive, that the Duffers wouldn't do that to us. But the more I analyse it, the more certain I become. Murray fits every pattern the show has established for characters who die heroically in finales. He's completed his arc, he's beloved but expendable, he's positioned in danger, and his death would serve the story's need for emotional stakes without breaking the show's core. I really hope I'm wrong. I want Murray to survive and get to live out his days being paranoid about government conspiracies in peace. But if we're being realistic about how Stranger Things operates, Murray Bauman is probably not making it to the series finale. Okay, so if you've watched the Volume 2 trailer and didn't immediately panic about Steve and Dustin, then you're way stronger than I am. Because that "you die, I die" moment, absolutely devastating foreshadowing, and the internet has been losing its collective mind over it ever since. In the trailer, there's this scene where Steve and Dustin are together, clearly in the middle of some dangerous situation, and they repeat this line they first said to each other back in Season 3. "You die, I die." In the original context, it was this beautiful moment of friendship, this promise that they were in it together, no matter what. Steve had become Dustin's older brother figure after Season 2, and that line cemented their bond. It was sweet and emotional, and we all loved it. But now they're saying it again, right before what's presumably one of the most dangerous battles in the entire series, and it doesn't feel sweet anymore. It feels like a promise, or a prophecy, or both. The Duffers know exactly what they're doing, by the way. They know we all remember that Season 3 moment. They know we've spent years loving the Steve and Dustin friendship. And they know that having them repeat that specific line in the final season trailer would send every single fan into an absolute spiral of anxiety. It's brilliant and cruel in equal measure. So the big question everyone's asking is, does this mean one of them dies, or both? Or is it just a red herring designed to make us panic, whilst they kill someone else entirely? Let's start with the theory that Steve dies. This one has the most evidence behind it, honestly, which is terrifying. Steve has been dancing with death since Season 1. In the first season, he got beaten up by Jonathan. In Season 2, Billy beat him unconscious with a plate. In Season 3, Russian soldiers tortured him and beat him to a bloody pulp. In Season 4, he got dragged into the Upside Down and mauled by Vecna's bats, nearly bleeding out before Nancy and Robin saved him. The pattern is clear. Every single season, Steve nearly dies. And patterns like that in storytelling usually build to something. There's also the radio tower situation. In the Volume 1 episode, Steve and Jonathan climbed up this massive radio tower, and there was all this discussion about how dangerous it was, how the power needed to be cut, all this setup that felt like foreshadowing. Episode 5 of Volume 2 is titled Shock Jock, and loads of people think that refers to Steve getting electrocuted on that tower. The title works as a pun because shock jock means a controversial radio host, but it could also literally mean someone getting shocked. That's the kind of dark wordplay the Duffers love. If Steve dies, it would absolutely destroy Dustin. And that's narratively powerful, isn't it? Dustin already lost Eddie in Season 4, his other older brother figure, who taught him guitar and called him brilliant and died protecting him. Losing Steve too, losing the person who's been his mentor and friend since Season 2, would break Dustin completely. It would be the most emotionally devastating death the show could deliver, without killing one of the original 4 kids. But here's the thing, Steve was supposed to die in Season 1. The Duffers have talked about this in interviews. They'd planned to kill him off, make him the disposable popular kid who gets his comeuppance. But Joe Keery was so likeable, both as a person and as an actor, that they kept Steve around. And Steve became this incredible character, this guy who started as a stereotype and evolved into the babysitter, the protector, the heart of the older kid group. Killing him now, after all that development, after making him survive 4 seasons of near-death experiences, feels both inevitable and incredibly cruel. Then there's the theory that Dustin dies instead. This one is less popular, probably because we don't want to think about it, but it's possible. Dustin is one of the original four, which has traditionally meant safety. But he's also the one who suffered the most loss. He lost Eddie. He's watched Steve nearly die multiple times. He's the character who's been most affected by death already, which could make his own death feel like the culmination of all that grief and trauma. If Dustin dies, Steve would be destroyed. The "you die, I die" pact would take on a different meaning. Steve might feel like he failed to protect Dustin, the kid he's been watching over since season 2. It would be a different kind of devastation, but equally powerful. And it would break the "main kids are safe" rule that the show has maintained, which would shock the audience in a way that Steve's death, as sad as it would be, wouldn't quite manage. I mean, think about it. We've been conditioned to expect that Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will are untouchable. They're the core. They're the kids who started this whole story in season 1. If the Duffers kill one of them, it would shatter that sense of safety we've had for 5 seasons. It would prove that literally no one is safe, that the endgame is real and brutal, and no one gets plot armor anymore. There's also the theory that it's a complete red herring, that the Duffers put that line in the trailer specifically to make us panic about Steve and Dustin, whilst they're actually planning to kill someone else entirely. Murray or Robin or Jonathan, this would be very on brand for them. They love misdirection. They love making us worry about one character whilst quietly positioning another character for death. And then there's the truly horrifying possibility that the "you die, I die" line is literal, that both of them die. Maybe Steve dies first, protecting Dustin, and then Dustin dies anyway, because he refuses to leave Steve behind, or because he's trying to avenge him. Maybe they die together in some horrible sacrifice play. The Duffers said no red wedding, but losing both Steve and Dustin in Volume 2 would feel pretty close to that level of devastation. What makes this all worse is that the Duffers went on Jimmy Fallon's show to promote Season 5, and at one point they were showing off Funko Pop figures of the characters. And they knocked Steve's Funko Pop off the desk, just Steve's. It could have been an accident, or it could have been a deliberate hint. Knowing the Duffers, it was probably deliberate. They love dropping little clues like that, teasing the audience, watching us spiral into theories. To be honest, I don't think they'll kill both Steve and Dustin. That feels too cruel even for the Duffers, and they did promise no massacre. But one of them feels horribly, painfully possible. And that "you die, I die" line suggests that if one goes, the other might not be far behind, whether literally or emotionally. If they do this to us, it's immediately jail, right? That's the rule. You don't kill Steve and Dustin. You just don't. But I have this sinking feeling that the Duffers didn't get the memo. Speaking of characters in serious danger, we need to talk about someone who's been flying under the radar in most death theory discussions: Robin Buckley. And here's something that keeps me up at night. In the Stranger Things universe, planning a date at Enzo's restaurant is basically signing your death warrant, and Robin and Vicky just planned a date there. Let me explain the Enzo's curse, because it's genuinely unsettling when you look at the pattern. Enzo's is this Italian restaurant in Hawkins that's shown up throughout the series, and every single time it's connected to something going horribly wrong. In Season 1, it's where Hopper had dinner plans before everything went sideways with Will's disappearance. In Season 4, Joyce and Hopper had their romantic reunion dinner there after escaping Russia, which was sweet, but it came right before all hell broke loose with Vecna. The restaurant has become this symbol of things falling apart, of plans being ruined, of safety being an illusion. And in Volume 1, Robin and Vicky made plans for a date at Enzo's. They talked about it, got all excited about finally having a proper date night, and the show made a point of showing us that conversation, which is either really sweet setup for a happy moment, or it's the Duffers telling us exactly who's in danger. Given the track record, I'm leaning towards the latter. Robin's been Steve's best friend since Season 3, this brilliant, rambling, anxious person who worked with him at Scoops Ahoy and then Family Video. She came out to Steve in one of the show's most beautiful scenes, and he accepted her completely. They became platonic soulmates, the kind of friends who understand each other on a level that goes beyond romance. Robin is funny and brave and loyal, and she's absolutely integral to Steve's emotional arc, which is exactly why her death would be so devastating. You see, if Robin dies, it doesn't just hurt the audience, it destroys Steve. He'd be losing his best friend, the person who knows him better than anyone, right after potentially watching Dustin die, or nearly die. The compounding tragedy would break Steve completely, and that level of emotional devastation is exactly the kind of thing the Duffers love to inflict on characters and viewers alike. There's also the shock jock title to consider. Everyone's been assuming it refers to Steve getting electrocuted on the radio tower, but shock jock is actually a term for controversial radio hosts. And Robin has a radio show job in season 5. She's literally a radio host. The title could be about her, not Steve. Maybe she's the one who ends up in danger during whatever goes down at the radio station. Maybe the electrocution or shocking event happens to Robin, not Steve. And we've all been looking at the wrong character this entire time. The Volume 2 trailer has some properly terrifying moments for Robin. There's a scene in what looks like a hospital where Vicky encounters demo creatures for the first time. She's absolutely terrified, which makes sense because she's never seen these things before. But then there's this shot of a demo dog lunging past Vicky, and in the next frame, Robin's right there. The implication is that the creature is going after Robin, not Vicky. It's running past the new girlfriend to attack the established character, which is a classic misdirection technique in horror. Robin's death would also fit the pattern of newer main cast members being expendable. She was introduced in season 3, which means she doesn't have the original cast protection that the season 1 kids have. She's beloved, absolutely, but she's not foundational to the show's existence in the way that Mike or Dustin or Eleven are. Maya Hawke is brilliant in the role, but that brilliance doesn't necessarily mean safety. If anything, it makes Robin's potential death more impactful. The thing is, Robin's character arc isn't quite complete yet. She's just started this relationship with Vicky, she's still figuring out her place in the world, and there's more story to tell with her. Which could mean she's safe because her arc needs resolution. Or it could mean the Duffers are setting up a tragedy where she finally finds happiness with Vicky, gets to be herself, and then dies before she can fully enjoy it. That would be very on brand for them. Let someone find peace and love, then rip it away. I really hope I'm wrong about Robin. I hope the Enzo's curse is just a coincidence, that the shock jock title is about something else entirely, and that she and Vicky get their happy ending. But the evidence is stacking up in a way that makes me increasingly nervous every time I think about it. Let's talk about Jonathan for a second. And I say for a second because that's about how much screen time he's been getting lately, which is honestly part of the problem. Jonathan Byers was absolutely central to season 1. He was Will's older brother, desperately searching for him, forming this unlikely alliance with Nancy, taking on the Demogorgon to save everyone. He was brave and resourceful and emotionally complex. But somewhere around season 3, the show just sort of forgot about him. He got sidelined into this weird subplot about his relationship with Nancy, maybe not working, about him wanting to stay in Hawkins, while she wanted to leave, and it never quite gelled into something compelling. By season 4, Jonathan was basically just there. He had the whole California storyline with Will and Mike and Argyle, which was fine, but it felt disconnected from the main plot. He spent most of the season driving around in a van, occasionally getting high, and not really having much of a character arc beyond worried older brother who doesn't know what to do. It's not Charlie Heaton's fault. He's a good actor, but the writing just hasn't given Jonathan much to work with in recent years. And that's precisely what makes him vulnerable. When a character's arc has stalled out, when the writers seem unsure what to do with them, that character becomes expendable. Jonathan fits into this weird narrative limbo where he's too important to ignore completely, but not central enough to protect. He's Will's brother, so his death would devastate Will and Joyce. But he's not part of the core friend group, not really. He's adjacent to the main action, which in television terms is a dangerous place to be. The most obvious death scenario for Jonathan is that he dies protecting Will. It would be full circle, wouldn't it? Season 1 was all about Jonathan trying to save Will from the Upside Down, putting himself in danger to bring his little brother home. Now Will has powers, Will is connected to Vecna in ways that make him a target, and Jonathan could easily sacrifice himself to save Will one final time. It would be poetic and tragic, and would give Jonathan's character a meaningful ending even if his recent seasons have been lacking. There's also the Nancy angle. The love triangle between Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan has been dragging on for seasons now, and it needs resolution. One way to resolve it definitively is to kill Jonathan. Nancy would be devastated, Steve would feel guilty for being the alternative option, and it would close that storyline without having to actually make Nancy choose. It's a bit of a cop-out from a writing perspective, but it would work emotionally. What worries me is how little Jonathan has been featured in the promotional material for Season 5. Charlie Heaton is in the posters and trailers, obviously, but he's not getting the same spotlight as other characters. He's not in the emotional centre of the marketing, and when an actor isn't being prominently featured in the final season promotion, it sometimes means their character isn't making it to the end. To be honest, Jonathan deserves better than to be killed off after being sidelined for 2 seasons. His character had so much potential that just sort of fizzled out, and using his death as an emotional beat feels a bit cheap when the show hasn't invested in him properly recently. But cheap or not, it would absolutely wreck Joyce and Will. Joyce has already lost Bob. She can't lose one of her sons. That would be unbearable. The question is whether Jonathan's death would wreck the audience the way losing Steve or Dustin would. And I'm not sure it would, which is kind of tragic when you think about it. We should care more about Jonathan. He's been here since the beginning, but the show has neglected him enough that his death might not hit as hard as it should, and that could actually make the Duffers more willing to pull the trigger. Jonathan's in danger because his arc feels expendable, but that narrative weakness might also be what saves him. If the Duffers want maximum emotional impact, they'll kill someone the audience is currently more invested in. Jonathan might survive simply because his death wouldn't hurt enough. So Max technically died already. Like clinically dead, heart stopped, no breathing, the whole thing. At the end of Season 4, after Vecna broke her arms and legs, shattered her bones, and took her eyes, Max's heart stopped beating. She was gone for over a minute. And then 11, through sheer force of will and probably some power we don't fully understand, brought her back. But Max didn't exactly come back whole. She's been in a coma ever since, her body lying in a hospital bed, whilst her consciousness is trapped somewhere else. Somewhere in Vecna's mind specifically. In Volume 1, we see that Max is alive in Henry Creel's memories, wandering through his mental landscape alongside Holly Wheeler and the other kids that Vecna kidnapped. She's aware. She's trying to find a way out, but she's not in her own body anymore. It's this horrible liminal state between alive and dead that's been torturing Lucas and the audience for an entire season. The big question is whether Max will actually die in Volume 2 or whether she'll finally wake up. Personally, I don't think there's any way the Duffers kill Max after making her survive Season 4. They had the perfect opportunity to let her stay dead. It would have been devastating, but clean. Vecna needed 4 kills to open the gates. Max was the 4th, and even though 11 brought her back, it was too late to stop the gates from opening. Max dying would have been this tragic sacrifice that changed everything. But they didn't let her die. They brought her back and put her in a coma, which means they have plans for her. Killing Max now, after keeping her alive in this in-between state for an entire season, would feel cruel in a way that goes beyond the Duffers' usual brand of emotional terrorism. We've watched Lucas sit by her bedside. We've seen how her maybe death has affected everyone. To put the audience and the characters through all of that grief and hope, only to kill her anyway in Volume 2, would be too much, even for a show that killed Bob and Eddie. Episode 6 of Volume 2 is titled Escape from Camazotz, which is a direct reference to A Wrinkle in Time. In that book, Camazotz is this planet where everyone's mind is controlled by a malevolent entity called IT. The kids have to rescue their father from IT's mental prison. The parallels are pretty obvious. Max, Holly, and the other kidnapped kids are trapped in Vecna's mental control, and someone needs to rescue them. The episode title literally has the word escape in it, which suggests they do get out. Max is going to wake up. She has to. But that doesn't mean all the kids are safe. Holly Wheeler is Nancy and Mike's little sister, and she's been in serious danger since Vecna took her in Volume 1. She's young, she's vulnerable, and she's trapped in the mind of a serial killer. The Duffers could absolutely kill Holly to raise the stakes without breaking their no main character deaths guideline. Holly isn't part of the core cast. Her death would devastate Nancy and Mike and their parents, but it wouldn't shatter the show's foundation. She's the perfect, expendable Wheeler. Then there's Derek Turnbow, who might be my favourite new character in years. Derek started out as dipshit Derek, this kid who was kind of useless and annoying, but over the course of Volume 1, he became delightful Derek. Joyce believed in him, gave him a chance, and he proved himself. He went from comic relief to genuinely heroic. And that character arc is exactly the kind of thing that gets you killed in Stranger Things. You see, Derek fits the Eddie Munson pattern. New character in the final season, quickly becomes beloved by the audience, joins the fight against the supernatural threat, and then dies heroically. Eddie's death wrecked everyone because we'd only just met him, only just started loving him, and then he was gone. Derek could very easily follow the same trajectory. Jake Connolly's performance has made Derek a breakout character, which in Stranger Things terms is basically a death sentence. There's this clip that Netflix released recently showing Derek and the other kidnapped kids waking up in this idyllic field with peaceful music playing. They're under Mr. Whatsit's control, this entity from A Wrinkle in Time that Vecna seems to be using. The kids think they're safe and happy, but it's an illusion. Vecna told Will in Volume 1 that he plans to use the children as vessels to reshape the world, that they're easier to control than adults. The kids are in danger, not just of dying, but of being turned into weapons. Some of those kids probably won't make it out. Maybe not Derek specifically, but someone from that group is likely to die, either whilst trapped in Vecna's mind or during the escape attempt. The Duffers need to show that Vecna is still a threat, that the stakes are real, and killing a child character would accomplish that in the most brutal way possible. Max is probably safe. Holly might not be. Derek and the other kids are absolutely at risk, and the escape from Camazotz's episode is going to be either a massive relief or absolutely heartbreaking, depending on who makes it out alive. Okay, so here's the uncomfortable truth. The original party, Mike, Dustin, Lucas and Will, have basically Vecna in ways that no one else is. He understands Henry Creel's mind, and he's going to be key to defeating him. There's no way the Duffers kill Will before the finale. His arc isn't complete yet. If Will dies, it'll be in Episode 8, not in Volume 2, and even then I don't think they'll do it. Will has suffered enough. Killing him would feel gratuitous. 11 is the protagonist, the main character, the person with the most powerful abilities, the deepest connection to the upside-down mythology, and the most personal stake in stopping Vecna. She's also the character who's already died multiple times through fake-outs. If 11 actually dies, it'll be in the series finale as some kind of ultimate sacrifice, not in Volume 2. She's got full protagonist immunity for now. Mike Wheeler is 11's anchor, her emotional centre, the person who keeps her grounded. Their relationship is one of the core emotional through lines of the entire show. Mike also hasn't had much of an individual arc recently, which could make him vulnerable, but his connection to 11 protects him. If Mike dies, 11 loses her anchor, and that would break her at a time when she needs to be strong enough to stop Vecna. The narrative needs Mike alive, at least until the final battle is over. Lucas has been through hell with Max. He watched her die, watched 11 bring her back, and has been sitting by her hospital bed, waiting for her to wake up. His entire Season 5 arc is built around getting Max back, which means he needs to survive, at least until she wakes up. Lucas dying before Max regains consciousness would be too cruel, even for this show. He's probably safe through Volume 2, though the finale is a different story. Erica Sinclair is Lucas's younger sister, introduced in Season 2, but not really part of the main cast until Season 3. She's brilliant and sassy and brave, and fans love her, but she doesn't have the same level of protection as the original 4. She's part of the extended group, not the core, which puts her in a more vulnerable position. Could the Duffers kill Erica? Maybe. Would it devastate Lucas and the audience? Absolutely. Is it likely? Probably not, but I'm not as confident about her survival as I am about the original 4. And then there's Dustin. Dustin is one of the original party, which should mean safety, but that "you die, I die" pact with Steve has thrown everything into question. The Duffers have never killed one of the 4 main boys, but if they're going to break that rule, Dustin is the one it would happen to. He's the character who's lost the most already. Eddie's death destroyed him. He's the most emotionally vulnerable of the group, and his death would shock the audience in a way that killing a supporting character just wouldn't. If Dustin dies, it breaks the unspoken rule that the main kids are untouchable. It proves that no one is safe, that the end game is real, and that even the characters we've been watching since 2016 can be killed. That would be a massive, game-changing moment, the kind of death that would dominate the cultural conversation for months. But would the Duffers actually do it? Would they really kill one of the original 4? I desperately want to say no. I want to believe that Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will are safe, that they'll all make it to the end, that the worst they'll suffer is trauma and grief, but not death, but that "you die, I die" line keeps echoing in my head, and I can't shake the feeling that Dustin might not make it out of Volume 2 alive. He can't die. He's one of the originals, right? Right? There are a bunch of other characters floating around Hawkins and beyond who could absolutely bite it in Volume 2. Some would hurt, some, honestly, we might not notice. Vicky is the obvious one to start with. She's Robin's girlfriend, the girl Robin's been crushing on since Season 4, and they finally got together in Season 5, which is lovely. It's genuinely sweet seeing Robin happy and in a relationship, but it's also terrifying because Vicky has all the hallmarks of a doomed character. She's new to the supernatural chaos. She's planned that cursed Enzo's date with Robin, and in the Volume 2 trailer, she's the first one to encounter the demo creatures in what looks like a hospital corridor. Her expression is one of absolute terror, which makes sense because she's never seen these things before. She's not prepared for this, and unprepared characters tend to die. If Vicky dies, it would devastate Robin. It would be this horrible tragedy where Robin finally found love, finally got to be herself with someone who understands her, and then that person is ripped away. Very on brand for the Duffers, but killing Vicky would also feel a bit like burying your gaze, which is a harmful trope the show would probably want to avoid. So maybe Vicky survives specifically because her death would be problematic in ways that go beyond just being sad. Argyle is harder to predict. He's the stoner pizza delivery guy from California who became friends with Jonathan and helped out in Season 4. He's comic relief mostly, and he's probably still in California during Volume 2, which might keep him safe from the Hawkins chaos. But comic relief characters have a history of dying in this show. Alexei was funny and endearing, and he got shot at a fun fair. Argyle could follow the same pattern if the Duffers want to show that even people far from Hawkins aren't safe from the consequences of Vecna's plan. Personally, I think Argyle survives. His death wouldn't have enough emotional impact to justify it. Dmitry Enzo, the Russian prison guard who helped Hopper escape, is interesting. He risked everything to get Hopper out, reunited with his own son, and became part of the extended Good Guys team. He survived Russia, which is saying something. But surviving Russia doesn't necessarily mean surviving the final battle. Dmitry could die, and it would be sad, but it wouldn't devastate the audience. He's too peripheral. His death would mostly serve to raise stakes and remind us that war has casualties, There's a certain poetry to Dmitri dying after surviving everything in Russia, but I'm not sure the Duffers will bother. They've got bigger fish to fry. Dr. Owens is someone I keep forgetting about until I remember he exists and then panic. He's been the government scientist trying to help 11 and protect the kids since season 2. He knows too much, he's been in too many dangerous situations, and he's exactly the kind of character who dies because he knows secrets that die with him. Government scientists in these stories are basically expendable. They serve their narrative purpose, provide crucial information, and then get killed to tie up loose ends. Dr. Owens could very easily be one of those casualties. Karen Wheeler is an interesting case. She's Nancy and Mike's mum. She's been blissfully unaware of most of the supernatural chaos for years, but Volume 1 brought the danger directly to her house when Holly got kidnapped. Karen is finally involved in the story in a meaningful way, which either protects her because the show needs to explore that, or dooms her because having a parent die would be unprecedented emotional devastation. Killing Karen would wreck the Wheeler family and the audience. It would break the parents are relatively safe rule. But would the Duffers actually do it? I don't think so. Karen's death feels too dark even for them. Ted Wheeler, on the other hand, is peak expendable dad energy. He's been completely oblivious to everything happening around him for 5 seasons. He reads his newspaper, eats his chicken, and has no idea his kids are fighting interdimensional monsters. Ted dying would be sad for the family, but wouldn't particularly impact the audience. We barely know him. He's a bit rubbish, honestly. If the Duffers want to kill a Wheeler parent without destroying us emotionally, Ted's the choice. But his death wouldn't serve much purpose beyond shock value, so he'll probably survive through sheer narrative irrelevance. Then there are all the military and government characters who are basically cannon fodder. The soldiers, the agents, the people who aren't named characters, but who'll be in the battle scenes. They're going to die. That's their narrative function. They exist to show how dangerous Vecna and the upside-down creatures are, to raise the body count without killing anyone we care about. Sullivan, the military antagonist from earlier in Season 5 who was hunting 11, might die as a form of karmic justice. He was willing to kill kids to stop what he saw as a threat, and having him die whilst the kids he hunted end up saving everyone would be poetic. But Sullivan might also survive and have to live with being wrong, which could be its own punishment. The thing about all these supporting characters is that their deaths would have varying levels of impact. Some would hurt, some would feel narratively satisfying, and some would barely register. The Duffers will probably kill a few of them to show that Volume 2 is serious and dangerous, but none of these deaths would hit as hard as losing Murray or Steve or Dustin. They're the safety kills, the ones the Duffers can sacrifice without breaking our hearts completely. After all this doom and gloom, let's take a breath and talk about the characters who are basically guaranteed to make it through Volume 2 alive. Because despite all the anxiety and death theories, there are a few people who have proper narrative immunity. Joyce Byers is absolutely, definitely, 100% safe. Winona Ryder is one of the biggest names in the cast. Joyce is the emotional core of the adult storyline, and she's already lost Bob. The show is not going to kill Joyce. She's a mum who's fought through hell to protect her kids, who went to Russia to save Hopper, who's done everything possible to keep her family together. If Joyce dies, it would break Will and Jonathan completely, and the show needs them functional for the endgame. Joyce is making it through Volume 2, no question. Jim Hopper is equally safe. He already died at the end of Season 3, and the show spent an entire season revealing he was alive and rescuing him from Russia. You don't fake kill a character, bring them back, and then kill them for real 1 season later. That would be narratively exhausting and emotionally manipulative in a way that even the Duffers wouldn't attempt. Hopper survived a Russian prison and a Demogorgon fight. He's not dying in Volume 2. He's got full protagonist immunity alongside Joyce and 11. Nancy Wheeler is the investigative lead, the person who's been putting the pieces together since Season 1. She's main character energy personified. Nancy has been in constant danger throughout the series, but she always survives because the story needs her. She's too central to the plot, too important to the overall narrative structure. If Nancy dies, it would be in the finale, not in Volume 2, and even then I seriously doubt it. Nancy is safe. 11 is the protagonist, the person with Vecna on her hit list, the most powerful character, the emotional centre of the entire series. If Elle dies, it's a series finale sacrifice moment, not a Volume 2 death. She's completely untouchable right now. The whole show is building toward her final confrontation with Henry Creel, and that can't happen if she's dead. Will Byers just got his powers. His arc is finally coming full circle after being the victim for so long. The show spent 5 seasons making Will suffer, and now he's finally powerful enough to fight back. There's no way the Duffers kill him before that payoff. Will is safe through Volume 2 at minimum. His story isn't done yet. Mike Wheeler is 11's anchor and hasn't had much individual development lately, but his connection to Elle protects him. The narrative needs Mike alive to keep 11 grounded. He's safe. Lucas Sinclair is devoted to getting Max back. His entire arc is built around her survival and recovery. Lucas can't die before Max wakes up. That would be too cruel. He's safe through Volume 2. Erica Sinclair is probably safe as well. She's a fan favourite, she's Lucas's sister, and killing her would devastate the Sinclair family without serving much narrative purpose. The Duffers could kill her, technically, but I don't think they will. The difference between Volume 2 safety and finale safety is important. These characters are protected through the Christmas Day episodes, but the December 31st series finale is a whole different beast. Some of these safe characters might not make it through Episode 8, but for now, for Volume 2 specifically, these people are surviving. Thank God, because if the Duffers killed Joyce or Hopper or Nancy in Volume 2, I think the entire fanbase would riot. Some characters are too important to lose before the absolute end, and these are those characters. Now that we've covered who might die and who's safe, let's dive into the actual evidence from the Volume 2 trailer, because there are some seriously ominous clues hidden in there. The Duffers are absolute masters at trailer editing, showing us just enough to make us panic whilst hiding the actual major plot points. Every shot seems carefully chosen to hint at danger, without spoiling who actually dies. The Volume 2 trailer is basically a masterclass in making fans spiral into anxiety. It's dark, it's intense, and it's packed with moments that look like someone's about to die. The music is ominous, the lighting is terrible, in that very intentional horror film way, and every character we care about appears to be in mortal danger at some point. Let's start with what we've already discussed, that you die, I die moment between Steve and Dustin. The trailer makes a point of showing us that callback, that emotional beat, which suggests it's narratively important, but the trailer doesn't show us what happens after they say it. We don't see if one of them gets hurt or if they both survive the moment they're in. The Duffers are deliberately withholding that information, which could mean they're protecting a major spoiler, or it could mean they're playing with our expectations. There's this shot of Steve that looks like he's on the radio tower, the same one he and Jonathan climbed in Volume 1. He looks stressed and determined, and there's danger happening around him. The framing suggests something bad is about to happen, but we don't see what. Is this the shock jock electrocution moment everyone's theorizing about? Maybe. Or maybe it's a red herring, and Steve survives this particular danger only to face something worse later. Robin appears in several shots, and in most of them she looks absolutely terrified. There's the hospital corridor scene where demo creatures are attacking, and Robin is right in the middle of it. The editing makes it look like the demo dog is lunging at her, but trailers are deceptive. The shot could be from a completely different moment than the one it's edited next to. Robin could survive that hospital scene and die somewhere else entirely, or she could survive everything. We just don't know. The explosion in what looks like a laundry room is particularly interesting. There are chunks of what appear to be Demogorgon parts flying everywhere, which suggests someone's fighting these creatures in close quarters. But who? The trailer doesn't make it clear. It could be Murray, could be Steve, could be any of the adults fighting to protect the kids. The explosion looks massive and dangerous, and someone's probably caught in it, but the trailer isn't telling us who. Murray shows up in a few combat situations, looking his usual paranoid but determined self. He's armed, he's fighting, and he's clearly in the thick of the danger. But the trailer doesn't give us a death scene for him. It doesn't show him getting hurt or making a sacrifice, which could mean his death is too much of a spoiler to include, or it could mean he survives Volume 2 entirely. Jonathan appears in some shots looking worried and protective, which is pretty much his default state. There's nothing in the trailer that specifically suggests he's about to die, but there's also nothing that confirms he's safe. He's just sort of there, hovering in the background of more important action, which is unfortunately fitting for how his character has been treated lately. The Max and Holly storyline gets quite a bit of trailer focus. We see them in what looks like Vecna's mind palace, in that creepy Creel house, trying to find a way out. The lighting is this sickly green colour, very upside-down aesthetic, and both girls look frightened but determined. The trailer shows them running, hiding, and at one point there's this shot of Max reaching out towards something we can't see. Is she reaching for an escape? For Lucas? For someone who's about to save her? The trailer isn't saying. Vecna himself appears throughout, looking properly terrifying. He's the big bad, the final threat, and the trailer makes it very clear that he's still extremely dangerous, despite whatever setbacks he faced in Volume 1. There are shots of him in the Upside Down, shots of him confronting what looks like Will, and this general sense that he's orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. The real question is whether anyone dies fighting him in Volume 2 or if all the deaths happen in the finale. The storm imagery throughout the trailer is both literal and metaphorical. There's an actual massive storm happening, with lightning and dark clouds and wind, but it's also clearly meant to represent the emotional storm, the danger closing in, the end approaching. Very dramatic, very effective. It makes everything feel apocalyptic, which raises the question of how many people are supposed to survive an apocalypse. What's really interesting is what the trailer doesn't show. We don't see any actual deaths. We don't see anyone's last moments. We don't see funerals or crying over bodies or anything that would definitively confirm a character's fate. The Duffers are being very careful not to spoil the actual deaths, which means we're all just reading tea leaves and interpreting ominous looks. Historically, Stranger Things trailers hide the biggest plot points. The Season 4 trailers didn't spoil Eddie's death. The Season 3 trailers didn't show Billy's sacrifice. The Duffers know that if they put an actual death in the trailer, it would dominate all the conversation and spoil the emotional impact. So they show us danger without resolution, fear without outcome, and let us fill in the blanks with our worst anxieties. Which is working, by the way. We're all properly terrified. The trailer gives us clues but no confirmations, pieces of a puzzle without showing us the complete picture. It's frustrating and brilliant in equal measure. We can see that people are in danger. We can guess at who might die based on the ominous framing and dramatic music, but we can't actually know anything for certain until we watch the episodes. And that's exactly what the Duffers want. Beyond the trailer, there's been a bunch of interviews, social media posts, and promotional appearances that might give us hints about who's actually dying. And one thing about the Stranger Things cast is that they're either absolutely terrible at keeping secrets, or they're brilliant at controlled leaks. Either way, they've been dropping hints, and we've been analysing every word and gesture like our lives depend on it. Let's start with Gaten Matarazzo, because his comments have been haunting me for weeks. In that ET interview, when asked how fans should prepare for Volume 2 and the finale, he basically said to get tissues ready and that he doesn't have any words of comfort. No words of comfort. That's not reassuring at all, Galton. He also said something along the lines of understanding the anxiety fans are feeling, but not being able to make it better, which strongly suggests that something absolutely gutting happens, possibly to his own character or to someone Dustin is very close to. The way Gaten delivered those lines too, he looked genuinely emotional talking about it. There was this sadness in his expression that felt real, not like promotional acting. When actors get that emotional discussing their show's ending, it usually means the ending involves something deeply upsetting. He knows who dies, he's probably filmed the death scene, and he's telling us to prepare ourselves emotionally, which is both kind and terrifying. Then there's the Jimmy Fallon incident with the Duffer Brothers. They were on the show promoting Season 5, showing off these Funko Pop figures of all the main characters. They were lined up on the desk, cute little vinyl versions of Steve and Dustin and everyone else. And at one point during the segment, the Duffers knocked Steve's Funko Pop off the desk. Just Steve's. It tumbled off and fell, and there was this moment where everyone sort of laughed awkwardly. Now, was that an accident? Maybe. But knowing the Duffers, probably not. They're the kind of creators who love planting little Easter eggs and hints. They know the fans will analyse everything they do in promotional appearances. Knocking specifically Steve's figure off the desk whilst talking about the final season feels like a deliberate hint. Like they're telling us Steve isn't making it, that he's going to fall, that his story ends badly. Or it could be them messing with us, letting us think Steve dies so that when someone else dies instead, it hits even harder. The Duffers have also been very specific in their language about Volume 2's tone. Matt Duffer said the show isn't Game of Thrones, that there's no Red Wedding coming. But he also confirmed that one of the most violent deaths in the series happens in the final episodes. Most violent. That phrasing is doing a lot of work. Previous deaths have been sad, shocking, heroic, but violent suggests something brutal and potentially prolonged. It suggests suffering, not just a quick sacrifice. What could most violent death mean? Barb was dragged into the Upside Down and killed by a Demogorgon, but we didn't see much of it. Bob was torn apart by Demodogs, which was pretty violent but also quite quick. Billy was impaled by the Mind Flayer, which was brutal. Eddie was swarmed by Demobats and bled out. All of these were violent to varying degrees, so whatever's coming in Volume 2 must be worse than all of them. That's a properly disturbing thought. Various cast members have been doing interviews, and a lot of them get emotional when discussing the ending. Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike, has talked about how the final season made him cry multiple times. Millie Bobby Brown has said the ending is perfect but emotional. Noah Schnapp has discussed how meaningful Will's arc is this season, whilst looking like he might cry. These aren't just actors hyping up their show. They're people who've spent nearly a decade with these characters, and they're genuinely upset about how the story ends. Joe Keery has been particularly cagey when asked about Steve's fate. He deflects questions, gives vague answers about being grateful for the journey, and doesn't confirm or deny anything. Which could mean he's protecting a major spoiler, or it could mean he's deliberately being mysterious to fuel speculation. Maya Hawke has talked about Robin's arc being meaningful and complete, which could mean Robin survives and gets a proper ending, or it could mean she dies and her death completes her story. The phrasing is infuriatingly ambiguous. What they're not saying is just as interesting as what they are saying. None of them have definitively stated that their character survives. No one said, "Don't worry, I make it through." They're all being very careful with their words, which is probably contractually required. Netflix doesn't want anyone spoiling major plot points, especially deaths. But the careful language and emotional delivery suggests they're all hiding something significant. There's also been some social media activity that fans have been reading into. Cryptic posts, throwback photos, farewell messages that could be about the show ending, or could be about specific characters dying. It's all very vague and open to interpretation, which means we're probably reading too much into it. But when you're anxious about your favourite characters dying, you analyse everything. The thing is, the cast and crew know who dies. They've filmed it. They've lived through those emotional scenes. And they're all telling us in various ways to prepare for something heartbreaking. Multiple people have mentioned tissues. Multiple people have gotten emotional in interviews. The Duffers have promised it'll be brutal. All of that adds up to something genuinely devastating happening in Volume 2. They can't tell us who dies, but they're trying to soften the blow by warning us it's coming, which is thoughtful, honestly, but also makes the waiting so much worse. Let's talk about something I find really fascinating. the episode titles for Volume 2 and what they might tell us about who's in danger. Stranger Things. Episode titles are usually pretty on the nose. The Vanishing of Will Byers, Will the Wise, The Battle of Starcourt. They tell you exactly what the episode is about without being subtle. So Volume 2's titles might actually give us some major clues. Episode 5 is called Shock Jock, and this title has been driving everyone mad with speculation. On one hand, shock jock is a term for controversial radio hosts, the kind who say outrageous things for ratings. Robin has a radio show job in Season 5, which makes her a literal radio host. So the title could be about Robin, about something that happens at the radio station, about her being in danger whilst doing her show. But shock jock also has a much more literal meaning. Shock. Jock, as in someone gets electrocuted. And we've got that radio tower that Steve and Jonathan climbed in Volume 1, with all that discussion about cutting the power and how dangerous the tower is. Steve's an athlete, a jock, and if he gets electrocuted on that tower, the title would be This Horrible Pun. The Duffers love dark wordplay like that, where the title means two things and both of them are awful. So is Shock Jock about Robin's radio show, or about Steve getting electrocuted, or is it about something completely different that we haven't even considered? The title's ambiguity is probably intentional. The Duffers want us guessing, want us arguing over interpretations, want us terrified for multiple characters at once. Episode 6 is Escape from Camazotz, which is a direct A Wrinkle in Time reference. In that book, Camazotz is this planet where a malevolent entity called IT controls everyone's minds. The kids have to rescue someone from IT's mental prison. The parallels to Max, Holly and the other kids trapped in Vecna's mind are completely obvious. They're in a mental prison, someone needs to rescue them, and the episode title literally says escape, which suggests they do escape. They get out, Max wakes up, Holly comes home, the kids are saved. The title seems to promise a relatively happy outcome for that storyline at least. But A Wrinkle in Time isn't all happy endings. There are losses and sacrifices. Just because the title says escape doesn't mean everyone escapes. Some of those kids might not make it out. Derek or one of the others could die during the escape attempt. Episode 7's title has been revealed: The Bridge. Following the Duffers' historical pattern, this penultimate episode title is characteristically dramatic and loaded with meaning. Previous penultimate episodes have had titles like The Bite, The Battle of Starcourt, and The Massacre at Hawkins' Lab, titles that signal shit's about to get real. The Bridge fits right into that tradition, suggesting a pivotal connecting point or crossing, whether literal, metaphorical, or between dimensions. It's the kind of title that promises major developments heading into the finale. The thing about Stranger Things episode titles is that they're sometimes exactly what they appear to be, and sometimes complete misdirection. The Massacre at Hawkins' Lab was literally about a massacre at Hawkins' Lab. But other titles have been more metaphorical or referred to minor plot points rather than the main action. So we can't rely on titles completely. They're clues, but they're not guarantees. Shock Jock is either really obvious foreshadowing or it's a red herring. Escape from Camazotz either promises Max's survival or it's setting us up for tragedy. And The Bridge, episode 7's title, is probably going to make everything worse. Okay, let's put aside our feelings for a second and think about this like writers. If you were the Duffers, who would you kill to make the most impactful, narratively satisfying story? Not who would hurt the most to lose personally, but who serves the story best by dying. From a pure writing perspective, character deaths need to accomplish something. They need to raise stakes, complete character arcs, create emotional resonance, or fundamentally change the remaining characters. A death that doesn't do any of those things is just shock value, and whilst the Duffers love shocking us, they're not killing people randomly. Every major death in Stranger Things has served a narrative purpose. Murray's death makes the most sense from a structural standpoint. His character arc is complete. He's gone from paranoid outsider to trusted ally. He's helped solve problems, saved lives, and become part of the found family. There's nowhere else for his character to develop that would feel organic. His death would devastate Joyce and Hopper without destroying them. It would raise the stakes by proving that even the clever, capable people don't always survive. And it would follow the established pattern of beloved supporting characters dying heroically. Steve's death would serve a different narrative function. It would devastate Dustin, completing this tragic parallel with Eddie's death. It would show that even the characters who've survived everything, who've been in danger season after season, can finally run out of luck. Steve dying would break the audience's sense of safety. We've watched him nearly die so many times that we've started to believe he's invincible. Proving he's not would be a massive emotional gut punch that would make the finale feel genuinely dangerous. But here's the thing. Steve's death might be too devastating. It might cross the line from impactful to gratuitous. Dustin already lost Eddie. Putting him through losing Steve too, one season later, feels cruel in a way that serves the writer's desire for tragedy more than it serves the story. Sometimes you can hit the audience too hard, and they stop engaging emotionally because it's just too much pain. Robin's death would emotionally wound Steve and create this tragedy where she finally found happiness with Vicky, only to have it ripped away. From a pure storytelling perspective, that's compelling. The queer character finally gets a girlfriend, finally gets to be herself, and then dies. It's dramatic, but it's also potentially problematic. Killing your queer character right after she finds love is a trope that's been done to death, and not in a good way. The Duffers would have to be very careful with that death to make it feel earned rather than harmful. Jonathan's death would complete Will's arc in a poetic way. The brother who spent season 1 trying to save Will could die protecting Will now that Will has powers and agency. It would devastate Joyce and give Jonathan a meaningful ending, even though his recent character development has been lacking. But would Jonathan's death really impact the audience the way the story needs? He's been sidelined enough that his death might not hit as hard as it should, which makes it less effective as a narrative tool. I know this sounds cold, analysing whose death would be most useful to the plot, but that's how TV writing works, especially in final seasons. The Duffers have to balance shocking the audience with devastating them, giving deaths meaning versus just killing people for tears. They need to make us feel like the sacrifice mattered, whilst also showing that war has real consequences. The best deaths are the ones that feel inevitable, in hindsight, but surprising in the moment. Bob's death was shocking when it happened, but looking back, it made complete sense. He was the kind of person who'd sacrifice himself to save others. Eddie's death followed the same pattern. The narrative was leading there all along, but we were too busy loving him to see it coming. Whoever dies in Volume 2 needs to feel like that. Shocking but inevitable. Heartbreaking but meaningful. The kind of death that makes you cry but also makes you understand why it had to happen that way. From a narrative perspective, Murray or Steve make the most sense. They're beloved, their deaths would raise stakes, and they could die heroically in ways that feel true to their characters. But the Duffers might surprise us. They might kill someone we're not expecting, because the unexpected death is the one that hits hardest. But God, I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope they find a way to make Volume 2 emotionally devastating without actually killing the characters we love. I hope the most violent death is a villain, not a hero. I hope we're all overthinking this, and everyone survives. But that's probably not very realistic, is it? What if we're all wrong? What if the Duffers have been playing us this whole time, and the person who dies is someone we're not even considering? We've been so focused on Murray and Steve and Dustin and Robin that we might be missing the actual target. The Duffers are brilliant at misdirection. They know what we're expecting. They read the fan theories. They see the social media panic. And sometimes, the best way to shock an audience is to give them something they never saw coming. What if Joyce dies? I know I said she's safe, and I still mostly believe that. But what if I'm wrong? Joyce dying would shatter every expectation we have about parent characters being protected. It would devastate Will and Jonathan and Hopper. It would be the kind of death that feels impossible right up until it happens. Winona Ryder is famous enough that killing her character would be a massive statement, and Joyce has already lost so much. Bob died saving her and the kids. Maybe her story ends with her making the same sacrifice. What if Hopper dies for real this time? He survived Russia, he reunited with Joyce, he got his happy ending, and sometimes, in stories, getting your happy ending is a death sentence, because there's nowhere left for the character to go. Hopper dying after fighting so hard to survive would be incredibly bleak, but it would certainly be unexpected at this point. We've all convinced ourselves he's safe because he already had his fake-out death. But what if that fake-out was set up for a real death that hits even harder? What if Nancy dies? Actual main character death, not a supporting player. Nancy has been in constant danger. She's been investigating and fighting and putting herself at risk since season 1. What if this is finally the time her luck runs out? Her death would devastate Mike and Steve and Jonathan. It would shake the entire ensemble, and it would prove that no one, not even the people who feel like main characters, are truly safe. What if Karen Wheeler dies? Properly unexpected, would devastate the Wheeler family and would bring the danger into the home in a way it never has been before. The parents have been relatively safe throughout the series. Breaking that pattern with Karen's death would be shocking and would show that Vecna's reach extends everywhere. Here's a wild one. What if it's multiple minor characters instead of one major character? What if the most violent death the Duffers mentioned isn't about who dies but how they die? Maybe Argyle and Dr. Owens and Ted Wheeler all die in some horrible attack, and the violence comes from the body count rather than from losing one beloved character. That would technically fulfill the promise of violence without breaking our hearts the way losing Steve or Murray would. Or, and this is the theory I keep coming back to, what if the most violent death isn't a hero at all? What if it's Vecna? What if Henry Creel dies in some brutal, drawn-out way, and that's what the Duffers meant? The villain getting destroyed violently, whilst all our heroes survive. That would be the best possible outcome, honestly. We get the promised violence, we get the emotional catharsis of watching Vecna suffer, and we keep all the characters we love. The thing about wildcard theories is that they're wildcards for a reason. They're unlikely. We're probably overthinking this. The Duffers have established patterns, and they'll likely stick to those patterns. Murray or Steve or Robin probably dies, and we've been right to worry about them all along. But there's this tiny part of my brain that wonders if we've been looking at the wrong characters this entire time. If the Duffers have been laughing at all our theories, whilst knowing the actual death is something none of us predicted, that would be very on brand for them. Here's something important to remember. Volume 2 is 3 episodes released on December 25th, but the actual series finale is a separate event on December 31st, which means there could be deaths in both. We could be crying twice in 1 week. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, here's some trauma. The split release structure is deliberate, and it tells us something about how the Duffers are planning to devastate us. Volume 2 consists of episodes 5, 6, and 7. Those are the battle episodes, the rescue missions, the desperate fights against Vecna's forces. If someone dies in Volume 2, it'll probably be during one of those conflicts. A sacrifice to save someone else, a death in combat, someone staying behind to buy the other's time. That's the Volume 2 death formula. But Episode 8, the series finale, is its own thing. It's being released separately 4 days later on New Year's Eve, which is quite poetic when you think about it. We're ending the show as we end the year, closing out both the series and 2025 at the same time. The finale will have its own stakes, its own dangers, and potentially its own deaths that are completely separate from whatever happens in Volume 2. This is important because we might survive Volume 2 with most of our favourite characters intact, only to lose them in the finale, or we might lose someone in Volume 2 and then lose someone else in the finale, doubling the grief. The Duffers have been very clear that the finale is going to be emotional and bittersweet, which suggests there's more pain coming even after Volume 2 ends. Why split them like this? Strategy, mostly. Netflix wants to maximise viewership and cultural impact. If they released all 4 episodes at once, We'd binge them in one day, and the conversation would be over quickly. But splitting Volume 2 and the finale means we get two separate events, two waves of social media panic, two rounds of theorizing and grieving. It extends the life of the show's final season and keeps people engaged for longer. From a storytelling perspective, it also allows the Duffers to structure two different emotional climaxes. Volume 2 can have its big battle, its deaths, its moments of heroism and loss. Then the finale can pick up after, showing the aftermath, dealing with the grief, and building toward a different kind of ending. Maybe Volume 2 is about defeating Vecna, and the finale is about dealing with what comes after. Maybe they're fighting in Volume 2 and grieving in the finale. Or maybe they're fighting in both, and the deaths just keep coming. The bittersweet ending the Duffers have promised suggests that the finale specifically will have loss mixed with victory. Bittersweet means we get something good and something terrible. Maybe we defeat Vecna, but lose beloved characters in the process. Maybe we save Hawkins, but someone has to sacrifice themselves to make it permanent. Maybe everyone survives, but Eleven loses her powers, or Will stays connected to the Upside Down forever, or Hawkins is destroyed and everyone has to leave. There are so many ways to make an ending bittersweet, and almost all of them involve loss. What worries me is that characters who survive Volume 2 might not be safe. Steve could make it through episodes 5, 6 and 7, and we'll all breathe this massive sigh of relief, thinking he's safe now. And then the finale happens, and he dies anyway. Murray could survive the battles only to die in the aftermath. Max could wake up and escape Vecna's mind palace and then die in the finale, just when we thought she was safe. The separation between Volume 2 and the finale means we can't relax, even after Volume 2 ends. We get a few days of relief, or grief, or both, and then we have to prepare ourselves all over again for the series finale. It's emotionally exhausting just thinking about it. And here's another thing. The Duffers said no red wedding, no massacre. But that statement might only apply to Volume 2. Maybe Volume 2 has 1 or 2 deaths, staying relatively restrained. And then the finale is where things get properly brutal. They technically didn't promise that the finale wouldn't be a massacre. They just said the show isn't Game of Thrones. That's a lot of wiggle room. I'm not saying the finale will kill everyone. That would be too dark even for the Duffers, and it would feel cheap. But the finale could have multiple deaths that Volume 2 doesn't. We could lose Murray in Volume 2, and then lose Steve and Jonathan in the finale. We could lose Robin in Volume 2, and then lose Hopper in the finale. The possibilities are endless, and all of them are terrible. We're so focused on Volume 2 right now, because it's coming first, because it's only 2 days away. But the finale is lurking behind it, waiting to destroy us all over again on New Year's Eve. And honestly, I'm not sure which one I'm more terrified about. Volume 2 is the immediate threat. The finale is the long-term dread. And we're going to have to survive both. Alright, after analysing everything, the patterns, the trailer, the interviews, the titles, here's what I actually think is going to happen in Volume 2. Murray Barman dies. I'm about 90% confident on this one. Everything points to it. He fits the Bob and Eddie pattern perfectly. His arc is complete, and his death would hurt without devastating. The Duffers need an emotional gut punch that doesn't break the show's core, and Murray is that perfect sacrifice. I really, really hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. One of Steve or Dustin dies, probably Steve. I'm maybe 60% confident on this. That "you die, I die" line feels like foreshadowing. The Funko Pop incident on Fallon feels deliberate, and Steve has been dancing with death for 5 seasons. But it could absolutely be a red herring whilst they kill someone else entirely. Or maybe both of them survive, and I've been panicking for nothing. Robin might die. I'd say 40% confidence. The Enzo's curse is real. The Shock Jock title could refer to her, and her death would devastate Steve. But killing her right after she finds happiness with Vicky feels problematic, which might save her. Jonathan could die protecting Will or Nancy, but I'm only about 20% confident. It would make narrative sense, but might not have enough emotional impact. And there's maybe a 10% chance someone completely unexpected dies instead, someone we haven't been worrying about at all. My actual prediction? 2 to 3 deaths in Volume 2. Murray almost certainly. Possibly Steve or Robin, maybe one of the kidnapped kids. And then more deaths in the finale that we can't even predict yet. But I could be completely wrong about all of this. The Duffers have surprised us before. Let's be real. After going through all of this analysis, all these theories and patterns and trailer breakdowns, we're all going to be emotional wrecks on December 25th. So here's some truly unhelpful advice on how to prepare for Volume 2. First, accept that someone is probably dying. We've spent the last hour or so analysing who and why, and whilst we don't know for certain, the evidence strongly suggests at least one major death is coming. Fighting that reality just makes it worse when it happens. Better to go in expecting tears than to be blindsided. Second, get those tissues Gayton mentioned. He wasn't joking. The cast knows what's coming, and they're all warning us to prepare emotionally. Listen to them. Have the tissues ready. Maybe some comfort food. Definitely have your phone charged so you can immediately text your friends and spiral together. Third, if you've got a favourite character who's in danger, maybe rewatch their best moments before Volume 2 drops. Appreciate them whilst they're still alive. Say your goodbyes preemptively, just in case. It sounds morbid, but it might help with the grief if the worst happens. Fourth, avoid spoilers if you can't watch immediately. The internet will be absolutely flooded with reactions, theories, and probably definitive spoilers within hours of Volume 2 releasing. If you can't binge it right away on Christmas Day, mute keywords, avoid social media, and protect yourself from having the deaths spoiled before you can experience them properly. But also, remember it's a fictional show. Our feelings are real and valid, but these are characters, not actual people. It's okay to be emotionally invested. It's okay to cry over a TV show, but it's also okay to step back and remember that it's meant to be entertainment. The Duffers are trying to make us feel things, and feeling things means they've done their job well. There's something cathartic about grieving fictional characters. It's a safe way to process emotions, to cry about loss without it being real loss. Stranger Things has given us years of joy and excitement and community. If it makes us cry at the end, that's part of the experience. That's the price of caring about a story. And we're all in this together. The Stranger Things fandom has been speculating and theorising and creating art and sharing theories for nearly a decade. Whatever happens in Volume 2, we'll process it as a community. We'll cry together, we'll analyse together, we'll support each other through whatever deaths the Duffers throw at us. So yeah, get your tissues, prepare your feelings, clear your schedule for December 25th, and maybe say a little prayer to the Duffer brothers that they'll be merciful. Though let's be honest, mercy isn't really their style. And that, my dear friends, is every theory, every clue, and every fear about who might die in Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 2. Remember, all of this is pure speculation until December 25th. We've analysed trailers and interviews, we've looked at patterns and narrative structure, we've panicked over every possible death scenario, but we won't actually know who dies until we watch those episodes. The Duffers might prove all our theories wrong. They might kill someone we never saw coming. They might spare everyone we've been worrying about and devastate us in completely unexpected ways. Volume 2 releases in just 2 days, on Christmas Day 2025. 3 episodes that will either confirm our worst fears or surprise us completely. And then 4 days later, on December 31st, the series finale drops, and we get to go through this emotional torture all over again. We've been on this journey with Stranger Things for nearly a decade now. Since 2016, we've watched these kids grow up, we've seen Hawkins face impossible dangers, and we've fallen in love with characters who've become like family. Whatever happens in Volume 2, whatever deaths the Duffers have planned, it's all part of this incredible story they've been telling. It's going to hurt, probably quite a lot, but it'll also be meaningful and beautiful and exactly the ending this show deserves. In future videos, I'll probably do a reaction to Volume 2, maybe a full analysis of who actually died and whether I got any of my predictions right. And then we'll do it all over again for the finale on New Year's Eve. But until then, stay safe, Get those tissues ready, and sweet dreams. Well, as sweet as they can be when you're having nightmares about Steve dying. See you on the other side.